Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone. What if the voice you call discipline is actually the wound that never healed? Have you ever noticed how critical you are of yourself even when no one else seems to care? That harsh voice in your head, the one that constantly measures you against some impossible standard, it didn't appear out of nowhere. You didn't choose it consciously. It is a learned pattern, a habit built over years, maybe decades, from the subtle cues and messages you absorbed as a child. Sometimes it came as a whispered expectation, other times as a loud command. You have to be better. You can't mess up. You're not enough. And over time, you started to internalize it, believing it was your own voice. What's harder to see is that this voice often comes from a place of protection. It tried to keep you safe from criticism, rejection, or failure. The irony is that what once felt like safety now feels like constant judgment. That inner critic, which may have once shielded you, now weighs you down. You wake up in the morning already bracing for your own disappointment. You work hard, accomplish things, and yet there is no relief, only the quiet, relentless voice reminding you to try harder, do more, or be someone you're not. The struggle is real. It's hard to be compassionate towards yourself when that voice has felt so familiar for so long, but awareness is the first step. You can start by noticing the tone, the words, and the way it shapes your decisions. Ask yourself, where did this come from? Who taught me that this kind of self-punishment is necessary? And slowly, gently, you begin to realize that the critical voice isn't the final authority. It's just one part of you, a part that learned to speak harshly in order to survive, not thrive. One truth that's worth repeating over and over is this: the voice in your head has a history, and understanding that history gives you power. It doesn't define you. You can learn to respond to it with curiosity instead of automatic fear or shame. You can pause and acknowledge the message without letting it control your choices. You can practice small acts of self-compassion, like noticing when you're being unfair to yourself, speaking kindly, or offering the same encouragement you would give someone you deeply care about. Even the smallest shifts begin to change the relationship you have with yourself. It might feel strange or uncomfortable at first, but that's okay. Growth almost always feels awkward before it feels natural. The more you pay attention to this inner dialogue, the more you realize it's not your fault, it's not a personal failing, and most importantly, it's something you can change. With awareness, you start to replace judgment with understanding, and over time, that inner voice becomes a guide instead of a jailer. You've probably noticed how often you push yourself to be perfect. Even in moments that should feel calm, there's this underlying pressure to perform, to appear flawless, to get everything right. It shows up in small ways at first, checking your work 3 times over, preparing for meetings, rehearsing conversations before they happen. Then it creeps into bigger areas of life, relationships, career, even how you show up emotionally. On the surface, perfectionism can seem like discipline, like a mark of ambition or responsibility, but beneath it lies something far more complicated, far more human. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. Perfectionism often disguises itself as motivation, whispering that if you just try harder, if you just get it right, everything will be okay. But no matter how many boxes you tick, no matter how much you achieve, the sense of relief is fleeting. The inner voice, the one that has been there all along, reminds you, you could have done better, you could have been smarter, you could have tried harder. It doesn't matter what you accomplished yesterday, it's already time to chase the next goal, to fix the next mistake, to meet the next. Impossible standard. That is the paradox of perfectionism. It promises safety and control, but delivers anxiety, exhaustion, and self-doubt. The truth is that perfectionism is often armor. It's a shield we learn to carry to protect ourselves from the harshness of the world, from judgment, from the painful reality that we are human. Somewhere along the way, we equated our worth with our performance. We believed that if we were perfect, we would be loved, accepted, or safe. We took on a heavy responsibility, as though our mistakes could bring catastrophe, and we began to punish ourselves preemptively. In trying to protect ourselves, we trapped ourselves. This armor feels familiar because it has been with us for so long. It becomes part of our identity. I am the one who tries hard. I am the one who never makes mistakes. I am the one who is responsible for everything. But the weight of it is heavy. It can make you feel isolated, constantly comparing yourself to others, measuring yourself against standards no one could ever meet. You see the gap between what you expect of yourself and what you are able to achieve, and you feel shame, frustration, or even self-loathing. Fear underlies all of this. Fear that if you fail, you won't be enough. Fear that if you show weakness, you will be judged or abandoned. Fear that if you stop trying so hard, the people around you won't respect you, or worse, that you won't respect yourself. And yet, paradoxically, the very thing you fear, the imperfection, the failure, the vulnerability, is also where your growth begins. The armor that protects you from judgment also keeps you from connection, creativity, and freedom. The harder you hold on, the less space you give yourself to breathe, to experiment, to be human. One of the most painful things about perfectionism is that it often prevents you from fully experiencing life. You may achieve great things, but the joy can feel muted because your focus is always on the next goal, the next standard, the next self-imposed requirement. Moments of rest feel guilty. Moments of celebration feel undeserved. Even accomplishments that others might see as extraordinary feel like just another checkpoint, another opportunity to criticize yourself. The inner dialogue that once promised protection now subtly whispers that nothing you do is ever enough. Awareness is the first step toward breaking free. Begin to notice the moments when perfectionism shows up, what situations trigger it, what emotions arise when you feel the pressure to be flawless. Pause and listen to the underlying fear. It might say, if I fail, I won't be loved, or if I make a mistake, I'm weak. Acknowledge these fears without judgment. Simply noticing them shifts power away from the armor and back to you. You can start to recognize that the fear is not a fact, but a story you've learned to tell yourself. Vulnerability is the antidote to perfectionism. It may feel counterintuitive because vulnerability requires letting down the armor that has kept you safe for so long. But vulnerability is not weakness. It is courage. It is the willingness to show up as you are, without pretending to be flawless, without hiding the parts of yourself that feel uncertain, messy, or inadequate. Vulnerability allows you to connect with yourself and with others authentically. It allows you to embrace the discomfort of imperfection and, in doing so, to experience life more fully. Courage is taking the first step toward letting go of perfectionism. It's choosing to do something even when the outcome is uncertain, even when the inner critic is screaming that you're not good enough. Courage is saying, I may not be perfect, but I am enough. I may stumble, but I am worthy. Every time you act from courage rather than fear, you chip away at the armor and create space for authenticity, joy, and self-compassion. Courage doesn't eliminate fear, but it allows you to move forward anyway. Change doesn't happen overnight, and that's okay. Perfectionism is deeply ingrained, and it will take patience, persistence, and practice to loosen its grip. Start with small actions. Speak to yourself as you would to a friend who is struggling. Celebrate your efforts, not just your results. Allow yourself to make mistakes and see them as opportunities to learn rather than proof of inadequacy. Slowly, the inner dialogue begins to shift from criticism to encouragement, from fear to curiosity. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes to approach life with compassion rather than judgment. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is to rewrite the contract you have with yourself. Instead of demanding perfection, you can demand honesty, effort, and integrity. You can expect growth, not flawlessness. You can honor your mistakes as part of being human. This simple shift changes the way you show up for yourself and for the world. It replaces exhaustion with energy, fear with curiosity, and self-criticism with self-respect. Remember this, perfectionism may have once promised protection, but it cannot keep you safe in the way it claims. True safety comes from self-acceptance, from the courage to face life as it is, not as an idealized version of yourself. The armor can be heavy, but it can also be put down. You can take it off one small step at a time, and with each step, you reclaim your freedom, your creativity, and your joy. The more you practice letting go, the more you discover that you are capable of being both disciplined and compassionate, ambitious and kind, human and enough. Start by noticing one area where perfectionism shows up in your life today. Ask yourself what fear is driving it. Allow yourself to feel that fear without judgment. Then take one courageous action. Speak kindly to yourself, try something new without obsessing over the outcome, or accept a mistake with grace. Each small step is a victory. Each step reminds you that you can live with less fear, more authenticity, and a deeper connection to your own worth. Perfectionism may have been your armor, but it doesn't have to be your identity. You are more than the standards you try to meet. You are more than the mistakes you fear. You are more than the relentless inner voice that measures, criticizes, and pushes. Beneath the armor is your courage, your humanity, and your capacity to love and accept yourself exactly as you are. And that, more than anything else, is where your real strength lies. There comes a moment in life when you realize that being hard on yourself isn't helping you. It's holding you back. You may have believed for years that self-criticism was the engine that drove your success, that pushing yourself relentlessly was the key to achievement and growth. But the truth is that self-punishment and harsh inner dialogue do not create courage, they create fear. Fear disguised as motivation keeps you small, cautious, and disconnected from the very life you long to live. Courage begins in the quiet spaces where you confront the voice that tells you you are not enough. It is not the absence of fear or doubt, but the decision to move forward anyway. It's showing up for yourself even when you're scared, even when the outcome is uncertain. You may feel unworthy, unprepared, or exposed, but courage asks you to take that first step regardless. And here's the irony. The very fear that once paralyzed you can become a compass, pointing toward growth and freedom. Being courageous is different from being perfect. Perfection asks you to hide, to control, to avoid failure at all costs. Courage asks you to be seen exactly as you are, to acknowledge your mistakes and vulnerabilities, and to keep going despite them. It's about choosing to act in alignment with your values, not in response to the voice that criticizes and limits you. Courage requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is uncomfortable. It may feel risky, even unsafe, because it forces you to confront the parts of yourself that have been hidden or denied. You may struggle with the idea that showing up courageously will leave you exposed or judged. That fear is real. It is normal. But it is also a signal that something important is happening. Growth often begins where discomfort lives. When you step forward despite your fears, you teach yourself that your worth is not contingent on success, approval, or the avoidance of mistakes. You learn that you are enough, not because you did everything right, but because you were willing to try, to face yourself honestly, and to keep moving forward. One of the most challenging parts of courage is breaking the cycle of self-punishment. It's tempting to respond to fear with control or perfectionism, to tighten the armor and push harder. But courage calls you to respond differently. It asks you to notice the critical voice, acknowledge its presence, and then choose a new response. One, rooted in empathy, patience, and self-respect. Courage is a practice, not a perfect action. It's choosing every day to act in a way that honors your values rather than your fears. The inner struggle is real. The critic inside will argue that courage is foolish, that vulnerability is weakness, that failure will destroy you. But these are lies your mind tells you to keep you safe in a familiar pattern. Safety is important, yes, but there is a difference between protecting yourself and imprisoning yourself. Courage allows you to step into life fully, to take risks, and to embrace uncertainty without losing your sense of self. It transforms fear from a paralyzing force into a teacher, guiding you toward the experiences that matter most. A simple way to cultivate courage is to take small, deliberate actions that challenge your comfort zone. Speak up when you feel unheard, share a feeling you've been hiding, or try something new without knowing exactly how it will turn out. Each step, no matter how small, strengthens your capacity for courage. Over time, you build resilience, and what once felt impossible begins to feel natural. Courage becomes a muscle you can flex, a skill you can develop, and a habit you can rely on. Courage is not just about external action. It's about how you relate to yourself internally. When the inner critic arises, notice it without judgment. Recognize that fear is present, but it does not define you. Speak to yourself as you would to someone you deeply care about, offering encouragement instead of condemnation. This internal dialogue is the foundation for courageous action because the voice you carry inside is the one you will hear in every challenge, every setback, and every triumph. Transformation happens when you begin to act in spite of fear rather than because of shame. Shame demands secrecy, perfection, and self-criticism. Courage demands honesty, openness, and self-compassion. By choosing courage, you break free from the patterns that have kept you small and create space for authentic growth. You learn that failure is not a verdict on your worth, but a necessary part of learning, creating, and becoming. Each courageous act chips away at the old belief that you must punish yourself to survive. One reflective truth to hold on to is this: courage often looks like ordinary life, making a decision, speaking a truth, showing up fully, not heroics. You don't need to climb a mountain or give a public speech to be courageous. Every time you face your fears, every time you act in alignment with your values rather than your doubts, you are practicing courage. Every step forward is a victory over the patterns of self-criticism and fear that have long shaped your life. Courage also brings freedom. When you stop responding to fear with self-punishment, you free yourself to experience life more fully. You can take risks in relationships, pursue meaningful work, and embrace creativity without being trapped by the constant judgment that once defined your days. Courage allows you to claim your voice, your boundaries, and your right to exist fully in the world without apology. In practice, courage might look like this. Notice the moment you start criticizing yourself for a perceived failure, pause and ask, what would it mean to act from courage instead of fear? Then take one concrete step that aligns with your values, even if it feels uncomfortable. Over time, these small acts build a foundation of trust with yourself. You learn that your worth is inherent, not contingent on success or approval. Ultimately, courage teaches you something profound. The voice inside that tells you to be hard on yourself is not the final word. You have the power to respond differently, to act with integrity, and to treat yourself with kindness. You have the capacity to choose courage over self-punishment, to allow vulnerability instead of hiding, and to grow through discomfort rather than being paralyzed by it. Each moment of courage rewrites the story you tell yourself, gradually transforming fear into strength, shame into authenticity, and self-doubt into empowerment. The path of courage is not easy. It requires persistence, patience, and an unwavering commitment to show up for yourself even when it hurts. But the reward is worth it. A life lived fully with freedom, connection, and a sense of self that is unshakable. By choosing courage over self-punishment, you begin to step into the fullness of who you are, embracing both your flaws and your strengths with compassion and clarity. And in that embrace, you find the true meaning of strength, not in control or perfection, but in the willingness to face yourself honestly, keep moving forward anyway. At some point, you realize that simply recognizing fear, perfectionism, or self-criticism isn't enough. Awareness and courage are crucial, but they must be accompanied by action, a conscious choice to rewrite the inner contract you have with yourself. You begin to understand that the patterns you've lived with for years, the voices that have dictated your worth, and your decisions can be challenged. You can respond differently. You can interrupt old habits and create new ways of relating to yourself that honor your humanity rather than punish it. This rewriting is not about self-blame or sudden transformation. It's about small, deliberate shifts in the way you think, feel, and act. It's noticing the moment your inner critic appears and choosing a different response. It's realizing that the familiar voice telling you to tighten your grip, to do more, to control every outcome does not have authority over your life. That voice may be loud, but it is not the truth. You begin to question it, to test its assumptions, and to discover that the world is not as unforgiving as it once seemed. The inner struggle during this stage is profound. You may feel torn between the comfort of the familiar, the old patterns that, though painful, feel safe, and the uncertainty of change. Breaking a lifelong habit of self-punishment can feel like stepping into a storm. Doubt creeps in. What if I fail? What if letting go of the old ways leaves me vulnerable? What if I'm not strong enough to be gentle with myself? These questions are natural, and they are signals that you are standing at the threshold of real growth. Change begins with curiosity. Instead of reacting automatically to self-criticism, you start asking questions. What is this voice trying to protect me from? Is this fear real, or is it a story I've been telling myself for years? What would happen if I allowed myself to act from compassion rather than control? Curiosity softens the inner dialogue and opens a space for experimentation. You can try a different response and observe the outcome without judgment. This is where transformation starts, in the small, everyday choices that gradually rewrite the narrative of your life. One of the most challenging aspects of this process is letting go of perfectionism and control without abandoning responsibility. Change does not mean becoming careless or indifferent. It means learning to guide yourself with clarity, kindness, and intention rather than fear. It means setting realistic expectations, forgiving yourself for mistakes, and understanding that growth is rarely linear. Life is messy and your journey will be messy too, but that messiness is not a failing. It is the terrain of authenticity. There is a profound truth here. Just because a pattern is familiar does not mean it is serving you. The ways you've coped with fear, shame, or inadequacy may have helped you survive, but survival is not the same as thriving. Thriving requires experimentation, courage, and a willingness to challenge the old narratives. You begin to see that your past strategies for self-protection are no longer necessary. You can learn to respond with awareness rather than reflex, with intention rather than reaction. Rewriting your inner contract also means embracing vulnerability in a new way. You allow yourself to be human, imperfect, fallible, yet worthy. You recognize that mistakes are not a threat, but a natural part of learning. You accept that emotions, even uncomfortable ones like fear, anger, or sadness, are part of the human experience and do not diminish your value. By doing this, you gradually dismantle the belief that self-punishment is required for success or acceptance. Practical action is essential in this stage. You begin to integrate small rituals that support this new relationship with yourself, pausing before reacting to criticism, speaking to yourself with kindness, acknowledging effort rather than solely outcome, and celebrating small victories. You create a feedback loop of reinforcement where each compassionate choice strengthens your confidence and gradually silences the relentless inner critic. You may stumble, and that is part of the process. The point is not perfection, it is persistence. As you continue this work, something remarkable happens. You start to feel safer in your own presence. You stop bracing against yourself, and the energy previously consumed by fear and self-judgment becomes available for creativity, connection, and joy. You realize that the inner voice that once demanded harshness is no longer the only authority in your life. You have the ability to guide your thoughts and actions with intention, and that is liberating. This process also reshapes your relationships with others. When you are able to act from a place of self-respect and compassion, you model the same behavior outwardly. Boundaries become natural, connection becomes authentic, and interactions are no longer filtered through anxiety, guilt, or self-doubt. You discover that letting go of control does not diminish your strength, it amplifies it. Strength is not in domination or perfection, but in alignment, clarity, and authenticity. Perhaps the most important realization is that change is an ongoing practice, not a final destination. Your inner contract with yourself will continue to evolve as you encounter new challenges, setbacks, and growth opportunities. Each moment of reflection, each act of self-compassion is a brick in the foundation of a more resilient, authentic self. The journey is continuous, but every step forward is proof that transformation is possible. In the end, rewriting your inner contract is about reclaiming your power, not by becoming someone new, but by fully inhabiting the person you already are. It is about choosing to respond with intention, courage, and compassion rather than reacting out of fear or habit. It is about learning to live in a way that feels sustainable, joyful, and aligned with your deepest values. By consciously choosing this path, you begin to dismantle the old patterns that have limited you and open the door to a life lived with freedom, authenticity, and purpose. Start today by noticing one area where your old patterns still hold sway. Pause, reflect, and choose one small action that aligns with compassion rather than fear. Over time, these small choices accumulate and the transformation becomes undeniable. You are capable of change. You are capable of freedom. You are capable of living in a way that honors your worth, your humanity, and your capacity for courage. There is a profound moment when you realize that all the work, becoming aware of your inner critic, confronting fear, choosing courage, and rewriting old patterns, leads to one essential truth. You are the person you've been waiting for. You are the one who can create safety, offer understanding, and provide the care and respect you once sought from others. The journey of growth culminates not in perfection, not in external validation, but in the quiet, steady recognition that you can be someone you feel safe with, someone whose presence brings peace instead of anxiety, clarity instead of confusion, and compassion instead of relentless judgment. The inner struggle at this stage is subtle but persistent. Even after years of work, it's tempting to revert to old habits, to fall back into the patterns that have been comfortable, familiar, and paradoxically protective. You may still hear that critical voice, still feel the twinge of fear when things go wrong, still doubt whether you are truly enough. These moments are not failures, they are reminders that growth is ongoing. What matters is not the absence of struggle, but the way you respond to it. You begin to notice that you can meet these moments with kindness, patience, and understanding rather than harshness. Feeling safe with yourself is an active daily practice. It means creating a relationship with your own mind and heart that is grounded in respect and trust. It's the ability to look at your thoughts and emotions without judgment, to feel deeply without retreating into shame, and to act with integrity even when life is uncertain or challenging. It's about being willing to experience discomfort without punishing yourself for it. When you cultivate this safety, you no longer rely on external approval or perfection as proof of your worth. You can live in alignment with your values and your truth, and that is liberating. Self-trust is the ultimate product of this process. It emerges not because life becomes easier or risk disappears, but because you have proven to yourself over and over that you can handle what comes your way. You begin to rely on your own guidance, intuition, and judgment. You start to understand that making mistakes, experiencing setbacks, and facing fear do not make you weak. They make you human, resilient, and capable of learning. Self-trust is a quiet confidence that is built from countless small acts of courage, compassion, and integrity. This stage also transforms the way you relate to others. When you feel safe